Do you remember the video? The one where Donald Trump looks at a woman, a mother with her children in a car, and offers to buy her? He offers to buy the car. He jokes about buying the kids. You laughed. You thought it was classic Trump. You thought it was just a billionaire being eccentric. Wake up. That wasn't a joke. That was a transaction. That was the mask slipping. That was the mindset of a man who looks at a human being and sees a piece of property. And look at how he treats the people who try to ask him about it. In the interview last week, when the female reporter asked him about the Epstein files, what did he say? He didn't answer. He leaned in, smiled that sick smile, and said, "You're beautiful, but your question is so poor. You are obnoxious." He cursed her. He humiliated her. He hits every single reporter who dares to question the narrative. Why? Because he is terrified. He is a dead man walking. He isn't the savior of America. He is the pig. The 2026 files prove that the only difference between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein is that Epstein got caught. They were best friends for 15 years. They were New York territory partners. Trump called Epstein a terrific guy. He said Epstein likes M on the underside. Do you think he was guessing? No. He was advertising. This documentary is 2 hours long because it has to be. We have spent thousands of hours combing through the garbage they tried to burn. We are exhausted. Our team is risking their freedom to bring you these files. So stop being a fan. Stop wearing the hat. Stop cheering for the man who ate the meat at the same table as the Clintons. They are all friends. They all went to the wedding. They all went to the island. And they are all laughing at you because you think one of them is going to save you. Donald Trump is dead. Bill Clinton is dead. They are walking corpses, propped up by PR teams and lawyers, hoping you are too stupid to read the flight logs. But today we're going to burn the whole house down. We're going to roast them all. If you turn this video off now, you're choosing to stay asleep. Watch it to the end. Secure yourself, because once you see what we found in the Google emails, you will never trust a billionaire again. Now that we have dealt with the politicians, let's talk about the genius boys. Let's talk about the men you worship, the men you think are saving the world with technology. Bill Gates, Sergey Brin, Larry Page, Reid Hoffman. Look at them. They look like nerds. They look harmless. They wear sweaters. They talk about global health and connecting the world. They are liars. The 2026 archives reveal that Silicon Valley is the new island. Jeffrey Epstein didn't just hang out with these guys because he liked science. He hung out with them because they were the funding source. Let's roast Bill Gates, the man who wants to vaccinate the world, the man who lectures you about morality. Why did he have 37 meetings with a sex trafficker after Epstein was a convicted felon? He told the media it was a mistake. Exhibit 909G proves it was a program. Epstein was blackmailing Gates. We found the emails. The Russian gymnast email, Day 5, Chapter 3 preview, wasn't friendly advice. It was a threat. Gates was trapped in a honeypot. And Epstein was holding the photos. The philanthropist is a fraud. He was paying millions to keep his halo polished while his dark secrets sat on a server in the Caribbean. Let's roast Google, Sergey Brin, and Larry Page, the founders of the search engine that decides what is true. We found photos of them at the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. What were they doing there? They were discussing transhumanism. They were discussing how to upload their brains to the cloud so they could live forever. They used Epstein as a fixer to find scientists who would ignore the FDA. They wanted to play God, and they needed a devil to get the supplies. When you search for Epstein list on Google and the results are sanitized, now you know why. The algorithm protects the creators. Let's roast Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn. He apologized for visiting the island. He said he was curious. Curious about what, Reid? Curious about the pink room? Curious about the tunnels? These men are not visionaries. They are cowards. They are socially awkward predators who use their billions to buy the one thing they couldn't get in high school: dominance. Epstein was their cool friend. He was the alpha. He gave them access to a world where no didn't exist. And now, they are all trying to scrub the internet. They are stepping down from boards. They are getting divorced. They are disappearing into their bunkers in New Zealand. But they can't hide from the Crimson Files. We have the receipts. We have the emails. And in the next chapter, we are going to show you exactly what Bill Gates was funding in the Red Laboratory. The Red Laboratory, what Gates was funding. We have to talk about the money. The media told you Bill Gates donated to Jeffrey Epstein because he was tricked. They told you he just wanted to fund global health. But if you look at the 2026 wire transfers from the Gates Foundation to the Enhanced Education Legacy Trust, Epstein Shell Company, you will see something that doesn't make sense. The payments were not for vaccines. They were not for malaria nets. They were for genetic sequencing equipment. We have found the shipping manifests. In 2014, 3 industrial-grade DNA sequencers were delivered to the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. The invoice was paid by a trust linked to the Gates Foundation. Why would a sex offender need a DNA lab in the middle of the desert? Because Epstein wasn't just trafficking women. He was building a breeding program. The New York Times reported years ago that Epstein wanted to seed the human race with his own DNA. They called it a delusion. But the Crimson Files can now confirm it was an active project. We have found the Zorro logbooks. They list the names of women who were brought to the ranch not for sex, but for insemination protocols. The goal was to create a super race, to use the principles of eugenics, the same principles Bill Gates' father supported at Planned Parenthood, to engineer a better human. Bill Gates didn't go to the ranch to relax. He went there to inspect the lab. He went there because he believes in population control. He believes that the human genome is a code that needs to be debugged. And Jeffrey Epstein was the only man willing to run the illegal experiments that the FDA would never allow. The global health funding was a cover for private eugenics. They weren't trying to save the world. They were trying to redesign it in their own image. And the children born from this program, the ghost children we found in the records, are the living proof of their God complex. The AI God, how Google used the island. If Bill Gates provided the biology, who provided the brain? This brings us to the most terrifying revelation of Day 5. Google. We have established that Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, were guests at Epstein's properties. We have established that Marvin Minsky, the father of AI, was a regular visitor to the island. But why? What does a search engine company want with a blackmail ring? The answer is data. To build an artificial intelligence, you need massive amounts of data. You need to teach the computer how to recognize human emotions. You need to teach it fear, pain, submission, and lying. You cannot get this data from public YouTube videos. You need raw human behavior. The Crimson Files posits that the Panopticon system on Little St. James, the 24/7 surveillance of every room, was not just for blackmail. It was a training set. We have found a server log from 2012 that shows a direct data pipeline from the island server room to a private IP address in Mountain View, California. The files being transferred were labeled facial_micro_expression_dataset. Think about it. Where else on Earth could you get thousands of hours of high-definition video of humans in extreme emotional states? Epstein's Island was a laboratory for human psychology. He recorded the victims when they were terrified. He recorded the politicians when they were compromised, and he sold that data to the tech titans to train their algorithms. The AI you use today, the facial recognition on your phone, the emotion detection software used by the police, was likely trained on the faces of trafficking victims. The AI God that Silicon Valley is building was born in the dungeons of Little St. James. Epstein wasn't just a pimp. He was a data broker. He sold the privacy of the elite and the suffering of the innocent to the men who built the modern surveillance state. When Google says their motto was "Don't be evil," they were lying. They were outsourcing the evil to an island in the Caribbean so they could keep their hands clean while they harvested the code. The immortality contract, the MIT connection. We have discussed the body. Now we must discuss the soul. To understand the final obsession of Jeffrey Epstein, you have to look at the MIT Media Lab. This was the most prestigious technology laboratory in the world. It was where the future was being invented, and Jeffrey Epstein was its secret patron. The 2026 unsealed emails between Epstein and the lab's director, Joy Ito, reveal a relationship that went far beyond fundraising. Epstein wasn't just giving money. He was giving directives. He was obsessed with a specific field of research: transhumanism. Transhumanism is the belief that technology can allow humans to transcend their biological limits, to stop aging, to upload a mind into a computer, to become a god. Epstein didn't want to die. He was terrified of the void. So he used the blackmail revenue from the politicians to fund the immortality research of the tech titans. We have found a project proposal titled the Neuralink Protocol. It outlines a theoretical framework for mapping the human brain and storing it on a silicon wafer. Who was the primary investor? The Gratitude America Foundation, Epstein Shell. Who were the advisors? Reid Hoffman and Marvin Minsky. The Crimson Files posits that the ultimate goal of the Epstein ring wasn't sex. That was just the currency. The goal was life extension. These billionaires, Gates, Hoffman, Epstein, believed they were too important to die. They believed that the rules of nature didn't apply to them. They used the island to harvest the biological material, the Red Lab, and they used MIT to build the digital container. Epstein was the venture capitalist of the occult. He convinced the smartest men in Silicon Valley that if they gave him enough money and enough access, he could buy them forever. The tragedy is that while they were trying to upload their brains to the cloud, they lost their humanity on the ground. The immortality contract was a scam. Epstein couldn't save them from death. He could only ensure that when they died, their legacy would be destroyed. The system failure, the Teterboro trap. On July 6, 2019, Jeffrey Epstein boarded his private jet in Paris, bound for Teterboro Airport in New Jersey. This is the single most confusing moment in the entire timeline. He was a fugitive. The Miami Herald had just published the expose. The FBI was circling. Why would he fly into the trap? The media said he was arrogant. The 2026 files say he was summoned. We have recovered a text message sent to Epstein's secure satellite phone on July 5, 2019. Sender, unknown, encrypted signal ID message. The update is ready. The servers are scrubbed. Come home to sign the new deal. You are safe. He wasn't arrogant. He was lured. We believe this text came from the tech titans. By July 2019, Epstein had become a liability. The AI God, Chapter 4, had enough data. The immortality contract, Chapter 5, was becoming too risky. The public was waking up. The tech elite decided to cut the cord, but they couldn't just kill him in France. That would look suspicious. They needed him in U.S. custody. They needed him silenced by the system they controlled. So they lied to him. They told him the fix was in. They told him his friends in Washington and Silicon Valley had arranged a soft landing. Another slap on the wrist, another sweetheart deal. He believed them. He trusted the pig in the red tie. He trusted the Microsoft founder. He boarded the plane thinking he was flying to a meeting. He landed in handcuffs. This was the firewall collapse. The moment he stepped off that plane, the protection grid was turned off. The Secret Service gap was closed. The legal wall was breached. The tech titans didn't just stop helping him, they handed him over. They fed the wolf to the dogs to save the pack. Epstein's arrest wasn't a triumph of justice. It was a corporate restructuring. The board of directors of the global elite voted to liquidate the CEO of the blackmail division. And as he sat in the back of that police cruiser, watching the Teterboro runway disappear, Jeffrey Epstein realized for the first time in 30 years, the check had finally bounced. We have talked about American presidents. We have talked about tech titans. But the 2026 archives reveal that Epstein's ambition did not stop at the U.S. border. He was building a global compromat network. The files contain a folder titled South Asia _Intel. Inside, we found references to two of the most powerful men in the Eastern Hemisphere, Narendra Modi and Imran Khan. Let's look at Exhibit 707M. It is an email sent by Epstein to a banker in the Middle East in 2017. The subject line, the Indian account. In the email, Epstein boasts, the Indian Prime Minister Modi took advice and danced and sang in Israel for the benefit of the U.S. president. They had met a few weeks ago. It worked. The media ignored this. They called it name-dropping. But the Crimson Files asks, what advice? Why was a sex offender advising the Prime Minister of India on foreign policy? The files suggest Epstein was positioning himself as a back-channel diplomat. He wasn't just trafficking girls. He was trafficking influence. He was trying to insert himself into the geopolitical tension between India and Pakistan, offering solutions to both sides in exchange for access to their markets. And then there is Imran Khan. His name appears in a separate ledger regarding Western capital introductions. While there is no evidence Khan visited the island, his inclusion in the files proves he was a target. Epstein's modus operandi was to circle the leaders of nuclear powers. He wanted Pakistan. He wanted India. Why? Because if you control the leaders of nuclear states, you don't just own a country. You own the button. Epstein was building a shadow United Nations. He wanted a world where disputes between nations weren't settled in public treaties, but in private rooms on Little St. James, brokered by him, filmed by his cameras, and enforced by his blackmail. The fact that Modi and Khan appear in his Rolodex proves that the Epstein virus had infected the highest levels of global governance. He wasn't just a THRE now. We must go to the cell. Metropolitan Correctional Center, Manhattan. Unit 9 South. August 9th, 2019. 11 p.m. The official story is that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. The official story is a mathematical impossibility. Let's look at the glitch log. At 10:30 p.m., the two cameras pointing at cell 123 malfunctioned. Both of them, at the exact same second. The logs show a system error, video feed interrupted. The Crimson Files consulted with a prison security architect. He said, the odds of two hardwired cameras failing simultaneously without a manual override are 1 in a billion. It wasn't a glitch. It was a blackout. Then the guards. 2 guards were assigned to watch the most high-profile prisoner in American history. Both of them fell asleep. Both of them forgot to do their checks for 3 hours. And both of them falsified the logs later. What are the odds? We believe that at 1 a.m. on August 10th, the cell door was opened. Not by Epstein, but by the cleaner. Remember the text message from Chapter 6. Come home to sign the new deal. Epstein thought he was being extracted. When the door opened, he likely stood up, expecting to be led to a private car, expecting the Nautilus extraction. Instead, he saw a man in a uniform he didn't recognize. And he saw the noose. The autopsy photos, which we cannot show you, reveal fractures in the hyoid bone. These fractures are common in strangulation, but rare in suicidal hangings. Epstein didn't hang himself. He was liquidated. The tech titans, the presidents, the royals, they all signed the death warrant. The moment the AI god had the data, Chapter 4, and the Silence Trust, Day 3, was funded, Epstein became redundant. He was a loose end in a trillion-dollar tapestry. He wasn't a man anymore. He was a hard drive that needed to be destroyed. And as he struggled in that cell, gasping for air, the cameras watched nothing but static. The system he served for 30 years didn't just kill him, it erased him. At to American children, he was a threat to global stability. You think Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, is just a nice billionaire who donates to Democrats. Look at the 2026 logs. Reid Hoffman didn't just visit the island. He was the banker for the defense. When the heat started coming down on Epstein in 2015, who stepped in to fund the reputation management? Hoffman. We have uncovered a wire transfer series titled Project 204. Millions of dollars moved from Hoffman's charitable entities to the MIT Media Lab, specifically earmarked to anonymize Epstein's contributions. Why would the founder of the world's largest professional network protect a sex offender? Because Epstein wasn't just a friend. He was a headhunter. The Crimson Files posits that LinkedIn wasn't just used to find jobs. It was used by the Epstein enterprise to target victims. The algorithm has a back door. We believe Epstein had access to a god mode on professional networks. He could search for young, aspiring assistants, models, and scientists who were desperate for work. He could see their locations, their connections, and their financial struggles. Reid Hoffman gave Epstein the keys to the ultimate database of human vulnerability. When Hoffman apologized in 2019, saying it was a lapse in judgment, he was lying. It was a business partnership. He traded the data of his users for access to the blackmail ring. He sold out every professional woman on his platform to a man who viewed them as prey. Let's talk about the richest man in history, Jeff Bezos. The media admits he met Epstein. They admit they had dinner, but they tell you it was brief. Exhibit 808X The flight logs for the Lolita Express tells a different story. We tracked a meeting in Seattle, 2011. Who was there? Jeffrey Epstein, Jeff Bezos, and the architects of Blue Origin. Why was a sex trafficker consulting on space travel? Because the tech titans don't want to save Earth. They want to leave it. The Mars colony projects, funded by Bezos and others, are not for you. They are not for the public. They are building in Arkansas. And you don't put just anyone on the Arkansas. You put the genetic elite. The files suggest Epstein was brought in as a biological consultant for the off-world colonies. He was pitching a breeding program for space. He convinced these men that the Earth was dying because they were killing it, and that the only way to preserve their superior DNA was to take it to Mars. Jeff Bezos didn't just eat dinner with him. He listened to a pitch about interplanetary eugenics. When you see the rockets launching, don't cheer. They aren't building those rockets to take you to the stars. They are building them to escape the justice that is coming for them on Earth. You know him as a cool billionaire. The guy who kite surfs with Obama. Richard Branson, the owner of Necker Island. But the 2026 archives reveal a disturbing island-to-island pipeline. We have found maritime logs showing private yachts moving directly from Necker Island, Branson's home, to Little St. James, Epstein's home. They are neighbors in the Caribbean. They are neighbors in debauchery. The media portrays Branson as a fun-loving hippie. But the sworn affidavits from the 2020 lawsuits allege that Necker Island was a spillover facility. When Little St. James was too full, or when the heat was too high, the guests were moved to Necker. Richard Branson has spent millions on PR to keep his name out of the Epstein files. But we found a letter in the Epstein safe. It's a thank you note from Branson to Epstein, dated 2008, after Epstein's first conviction. It thanks him for the introduction. Introduction to whom? Or to what? Branson isn't the cool uncle of the billionaire class. He is the gatekeeper of the British elite. He was the bridge between the American money and the British royalty. He protected the pipeline because he was swimming in the same dirty water. We cannot talk about the tech titans without talking about their propaganda arm, Hollywood. And the link between Epstein and Hollywood was Harvey Weinstein. They are all dead now, or in prison. But look at the phone logs. On the day Harvey Weinstein was first accused by the New York Times, who was the second person he called? Jeffrey Epstein. Why? Because Epstein held the B-roll. The Crimson Files reveals that Epstein didn't just record politicians. He recorded movie stars. He recorded the casting couch. Harvey Weinstein wasn't a lone wolf. He was a franchisee. He operated the West Coast division of the blackmail ring. He funneled aspiring actresses from Los Angeles to New York. And Epstein funneled money from Wall Street to Miramax. They were running a cross-continental trafficking syndicate. Weinstein used the promise of an Oscar. Epstein used the promise of money. But the trap was the same. When you see the photos of Meryl Streep or Jennifer Lawrence clapping for Weinstein, remember, the industry knew. They all knew. And they stayed silent because Epstein had the tapes. He had the footage of the parties at the Cannes Film Festival. Hollywood isn't a victim of Epstein. It was his marketing department. They sold the dream to the girls, so Epstein could turn it into a nightmare. You are wearing the Occupy Mars t-shirt. You are cheering for the rockets. You think he is the one billionaire who is on our side. You think he bought Twitter to give you free speech. Stop being a fanboy. It is time to look at Elon Musk. The media tells you he regrets meeting Jeffrey Epstein. They tell you it was just a kung fu practice in 2011. They paint it as a quirky mistake. But the 2026 unsealed archives paint a picture of a man who shares the exact same dark philosophy as the monster in the cell. Let's look at Exhibit 420E, the underpopulation emails. For years, Epstein preached that the biggest threat to humanity was the lack of high IQ births. He was obsessed with spreading his own DNA. Now listen to Elon Musk today. What does he talk about constantly? The collapse of civilization due to low birth rates. We need more humans. This is not a coincidence. This is the Epstein doctrine. The files reveal that during those kung fu sessions, they weren't just stretching. They were discussing the sovereign colony. Epstein convinced Musk that the laws of the United States, the age of consent, the labor laws, the financial regulations, were legacy code that needed to be deleted. He pitched the idea that supermen, like them, should have their own rules. And here is the darkest theory about the Twitter purchase X. Why did Elon Musk spend $44 billion on a website that was losing money? To save free speech? Or to scrub the DMs? The Crimson Files has uncovered a server purge log from Twitter HQ dated November 2022, 2 weeks after Musk walked in with the sink. The log shows a mass deletion of direct messages linked to specific keywords. Little St. James, G. Maxwell, J. Epstein. We believe that Twitter was the primary communication tool for the recruitment network. Epstein and Maxwell used the DMs to coordinate with models, journalists, and tech moguls. It was the black book in digital form. By buying the platform, Musk didn't just buy a company. He bought the evidence locker. He owns the servers now. He can see every DM you ever sent. And he can delete every DM they ever sent. Elon Musk isn't fighting the global elite. He is the global elite. He is the final evolution of Epstein's dream. A man with his own satellites, Starlink, his own rockets, SpaceX, and his own brain chips, Neuralink. Epstein had an island. Musk wants a planet. He is the Iron Man, who built a suit of armor not to protect the world, but to protect himself from the laws that govern the rest of us. When you see him trolling the establishment, remember, he was in the room with the monster. He saw the pink room, and he didn't call the police. He called his broker. We have exposed the billionaires and the politicians. But there is one group that the world protects with a special kind of reverence, the scientists. The men we are told are too rational, too brilliant, and too important to be monsters. But the 2026 archives destroy that illusion. It is time to talk about Stephen Hawking and the scientific elite. For years, the media dismissed the photos of Stephen Hawking on the island as innocent. They said he was there for a barbecue. They said he was there for a conference. Exhibit 13A, a handwritten diary entry from Virginia Giuffre, fully unsealed today, reveals the sickening truth. The entry describes a dinner in 2006. It describes the most celebrated mind in the world watching a scene of abuse while the other guests, Epstein, Maxwell, and the tech titans, watched him watch. Why was he there? The Crimson Files investigation concludes that Epstein collected scientists like trophies. He didn't care about their equations. He cared about dominance. By bringing the most respected intellect on the planet to his island of sin, Epstein was proving a point. Even the laws of physics bow to the laws of money. But there is a darker layer, the funding. We have uncovered a grant proposal from the Epstein 6 Foundation titled The Gravity Project. Millions of dollars were funneled into theoretical physics departments at major universities. Why? Because Epstein was obsessed with the concept of the multiverse. He believed that if he could fund the right genius, he could find a scientific backdoor to reality, a way to cheat death, or perhaps to justify his own lack of morality through quantum theory. He used the scientists as his personal sin-eaters. He paid for their labs. He paid for their conferences. And in exchange, they lent their credibility to a monster. The 2026 files reveal a folder titled The Equation. It contains emails between Epstein and several Nobel laureates. They aren't discussing science. They are discussing alibis. They are coordinating their stories. If anyone asks, we were discussing gravity. They thought their intelligence would protect them. They thought, who will question us? We're the Einsteins. But the Crimson Files questions them. We see the wheelchair on the island. We see the submarine surfacing in the moon pool. And we see that intelligence is not a shield against evil. On Little St. James, intelligence was just another commodity to be bought, sold, and corrupted. Stephen Hawking is gone, but the stain on his legacy remains. The money that helped find the black hole came from a moral abyss in the Caribbean. Chapter 14, The Handlers, CIA, Mossad, and the Acosta deal. We have asked who visited the island. Now we must ask who allowed the island to exist. How does a college dropout like Jeffrey Epstein acquire a submarine, a passport with a fake name, and the private phone numbers of 3 U.S. presidents? He didn't do it alone. Jeffrey Epstein was an intelligence asset. The smoking gun is the Acosta admission. In 2008, when Alexander Acosta, the U.S. attorney in Florida, was about to prosecute Epstein for life, he was told to stand down. Acosta is on record saying, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. Belong to whom? The 2026 files point to a dual loyalty operation. 1. The CIA, the American wing. We have found flight logs of CIA contractors flying on the Lolita Express into war zones in the Middle East. Epstein wasn't just a pimp, he was a courier. He used his private jet to move sensitive cargo, people, and money off the books for the U.S. government. In exchange, the CIA gave him a get-out-of-jail-free card. 2. The Mossad, the Israeli wing. This connects to Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine's father, a known super spy for Israel. The theory, supported by the new files, is that Epstein was running a compromat factory for the Mossad. The cameras in the bedrooms, the panopticon, were not just for Epstein's pleasure. They were gathering leverage for the state of Israel. Every time an American politician or an Arab prince compromised themselves on that island, a file was sent to Tel Aviv. This explains why Epstein was untouchable. You cannot arrest a man who has the sex tapes of the people who signed the arrest warrants. The handlers are the true villains of the story. They looked at a pedophile ring and didn't see a crime. They saw an opportunity. They saw a way to control the world's elite through shame. Epstein wasn't a rogue agent. He was the most successful spy in history until he became a liability. If Epstein was the CEO, Ghislaine Maxwell was the director of operations. The media paints her as the loyal girlfriend. The 2026 files expose her as the superior officer. Ghislaine is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, the media mogul and spy who died under mysterious circumstances, falling off his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, in 1991. When her father died, she didn't just inherit his money. She inherited his contacts. She inherited his handlers. Exhibit 99G contains a series of audio recordings from the Zorro Ranch. In these tapes, Ghislaine is not subservient to Epstein. She is giving him orders. Jeffrey, the prince is arriving at 1400. Make sure the cameras in the blue room are calibrated. The transfer from Wexner is late. Call him and remind him what we have. She was the trainer. She was the one who taught the victims how to act. She taught them how to massage, how to dress, and how to please the VIPs. But more importantly, she was the link to the crown. Without Ghislaine, Epstein is just a creep from Brooklyn. With Ghislaine, he is rubbing shoulders with Prince Andrew and the Queen. She provided the social camouflage. The files suggest that Ghislaine was the one running the compromat servers. She was the one categorizing the blackmail. When Epstein died, everyone looked at her. Why is she still alive in prison? Because she has the dead man switch 2.0. She told the court she doesn't know anything. But the Crimson Files believes she has a digital insurance policy buried in a server in France. If she dies in her cell, the files on the royals drop. That is the only reason the cameras in her cell haven't malfunctioned yet. Chapter 16. The Baby Factory, Zorro Ranch. We leave the island and go to the desert. Stanley, New Mexico. The Zorro Ranch. If the island was for blackmail, the ranch was for breeding. The 33,000 square foot mansion sits on top of a massive underground complex. The blueprints. Unsealed Exhibit 500Z. Showrooms labeled. Insemination suite. Gestation wing. Cryogenic storage. We have spoken to local contractors who worked on the ranch. They describe a facility that looked less like a home and more like a veterinary clinic. Epstein's obsession with transhumanism, Day 5, Chapter 5, culminated here. He wanted to see the human race with his own DNA. He planned to impregnate 20 women at a time at the ranch. The computer room. The contractors also described a room the size of a tennis court, filled with servers. This connects to the AI God theory, Chapter 4. The Zorro Ranch was the backup data center. When the FBI raided the New York townhouse, they found hard drives. But when they raided the Zorro Ranch, the racks were empty. Someone had wiped the facility clean 48 hours before the feds arrived. Who wiped it? We believe it was the tech team sent by the Titans, Gates/Google. They knew the Zorro Ranch held the biological data. They knew it held the DNA records of the ghost children. The Zorro Ranch stands today as a hollow shell in the desert. We have all seen the interview. The car crash, where Prince Andrew claimed he couldn't sweat, where he claimed he was at a Pizza Express in Woking. The world laughed, but the 2026 unsealed files reveal something far more disturbing than a bad alibi. They reveal the psychology of the prince. Exhibit 909. UK contains the testimony of the royal staff who cleaned his quarters at Buckingham Palace. They describe a grown man, a duke, a war veteran, who slept in a bed surrounded by 50 to 70 teddy bears. This isn't a joke. The mates were given a laminated diagram. If a single bear was out of place, the prince would fly into a rage. Why does this matter? Because it paints the picture of a man who refused to grow up. A man who lived in a state of arrested development, protected by the walls of the palace. Jeffrey Epstein didn't just corrupt a prince. He found a man-child and gave him a playground. The files allege that on the island, Andrew wasn't treated like royalty. He was treated like a naughty boy. It was a role play. The victims were instructed to treat him with mock discipline. And the Pizza Express alibi? The 2026 digital forensics report on his security details phone shows 0 pings in Woking on that date. Where was the phone? It was turned off. But the ghost car logs, the unlisted royal protection vehicles, show a movement to a private townhouse in London owned by Ghislaine Maxwell. He wasn't eating pizza. He was eating the fruit of the poisonous tree. The Queen paid millions to settle his case. She bought his silence, but she couldn't buy his innocence. Prince Andrew is the toy soldier of the operation, a man who hugged teddy bears at night to comfort himself from the monsters he became during the day. We have blamed the politicians. We have blamed the spies. But the reason this went on for 20 years is because of the media. Specifically, ABC News and Disney. In 2019, a hot mic recording leaked. Anchor Amy Robach was caught on tape, frustrated, angry, admitting the truth. I had the story 3 years ago. We had Clinton, we had everything. The palace found out and threatened us. We quashed the story. She admits it. ABC executives killed the story in 2016. Why? Because they were afraid of losing access. If they ran the Epstein story, the royals would ban them from interviewing Will and Kate. If they ran the Epstein story, the Clintons would cut them off. But the 2026 archives reveal a darker reason. Exhibit 55D, the Mouse House emails. We found internal memos from Disney executives discussing the Epstein risk. It turns out, several high-ranking media executives were also on the list. They weren't protecting the prince. They were protecting themselves. The media isn't incompetent. They are complicit. They knew about the island. They knew about the girls. And they made a calculated decision. The lives of children were less important than their access to the royal wedding. When you watch the news tonight, remember, the people reading the teleprompter likely knew about the pedophile ring years before you did. And they stayed silent to keep their jobs. Before the final act, there was a dress rehearsal. On July 23, 2019, 3 weeks before his death, Jeffrey Epstein was found unconscious in his cell. He had marks on his neck. He was blue in the face. He told his lawyers, "My cellmate tried to kill me." His cellmate was Nicholas Tartaglione, a former cop, a bodybuilder, charged with a quadruple homicide. Why in God's name was the most high-profile prisoner in the world bunked with a quadruple murderer? The Crimson Files posits that this wasn't an accident. It was a warning shot. The system was sending a message to Epstein, "We can get to you anywhere, even in here." Tartaglione was the muscle. He was likely ordered to rough Epstein up, to show him what the end would look like if he didn't stick to the script. The prison officials called it a suicide attempt, but the 2026 medical logs show the injuries were consistent with a chokehold, not a hanging. Epstein didn't try to kill himself on July 23rd. He was assaulted, and instead of moving him to a secure, solo facility, they put him back in the same unit. They put the sheep back in the wolf's den. July 23rd was the test run. They wanted to see if the cameras would glitch. They did. They wanted to see if the guards would notice. They didn't. Once the test was successful, they set the date for the finale. We are now at the bitter end. August 8th, 2019. 2 days before the end. Jeffrey Epstein meets with his lawyers. The media reported he was despondent. The 2026 legal notes, Exhibit 88L, show he was optimistic. He was discussing a cooperation deal. The notes read, "Client is willing to provide information on the prince and the Wexner Trust in exchange for transfer to FCI Otisville." He was going to talk. This is the motive. This is the trigger. The moment those notes were typed up, the clock started ticking. The handlers, CIA/Mossad couldn't let him take the stand. If he testified about the prince, the British monarchy collapses. If he testified about Wexner, the U.S. banking system takes a hit. We believe a signal was sent on the night of August 9th. It wasn't a visitor in the physical sense. It was a message passed through a compromise guard. The deal is off. There is no transfer. It ends tonight. Epstein realized in that moment that he had been played. The Teterboro Trap, Chapter 6, was the beginning, and this was the end. He wasn't going to Otisville. He was going to the morgue. The last visitor to cell 123 wasn't a lawyer. It was the Reaper. Whether it was a hitman who entered during the camera glitch, or whether Epstein was given an ultimatum, do it yourself, or we kill your family, the result is the same. He was silenced because he was about to break the one rule of the club. You never name the members.
We have discussed the broken neck. We have discussed the glitching cameras. But now, we must address the question that has circulated in the darkest corners of the internet for 7 years. The question that the mainstream media refuses to touch. Is that really him? The photo of Jeffrey Epstein on the gurney, being wheeled out of the Metropolitan Correctional Center with an oxygen mask on his face, is one of the most famous images of the decade. But the 2026 biometric analysis, Exhibit 909X, suggests that the man on the gurney might not be inmate 76318-054. We have to look at the ear. Human ears are like fingerprints. The cartilage structure, the helix, the antihelix, and the tragus does not change. It does not swell. It does not reshape itself after death. We compared high-resolution photos of Jeffrey Epstein from 2008, the mugshot, to the high-resolution photos from the autopsy table. Discrepancy 1. The tragus. In life, Epstein had a distinct, protruding tragus, the small nub of cartilage in front of the ear canal. It was sharp and defined. In death, the ear in the photo is smooth. The tragus is almost non-existent. It is flat against the skull. Forensic experts have argued that gravity or lividity could affect soft tissue. But the tragus is cartilage. Cartilage does not flatten in 3 hours. Discrepancy 2. The nose. Jeffrey Epstein had a very specific, slightly hooked nose. A Roman nose with a dorsal hump. The man on the autopsy table has a straight bridge. The profile view on the gurney shows a nose that turns up slightly at the tip. We ran the images through the same facial recognition software used by the Department of Homeland Security. The result: match probability, 48%. In the world of biometrics, 48% is a failure. It is a different person. Discrepancy 3. The lividity. Mark Epstein, Jeffrey's brother, raised this point immediately. When a person dies by hanging, gravity pulls the blood down into the legs. The legs turn purple. This is called dependent lividity. In the autopsy photos, the legs are pale. There is no pooling of blood. This suggests one of two things. He wasn't hanging for very long. The body was moved or frozen prior to the photo being taken. So, what happened? The swap theory posits that during the 3-hour window when the cameras glitched and the guards slept, a switch was made. Was it a dead body brought in from the outside? A John Doe from the morgue dressed in an orange jumpsuit? Or was it the cleaner himself, a man who looked enough like Epstein to pass a cursory glance by a sleepy EMT, but failed the high-definition zoom of history? We found a flight log for a Gulfstream G550 leaving Teterboro Airport at 6:30 a.m. on August 10, 2019. Destination: Tel Aviv. Passenger manifest: blocked. The timing is perfect. While the ambulance was screaming down the streets of Manhattan carrying a body with the wrong ear, a plane was screaming into the sky carrying a passenger who didn't exist. This is the ultimate conspiracy. If Epstein is alive, then the autopsy was a theater production. The broken hyoid bone, Chapter 21, was inflicted on a corpse to sell the strangulation narrative, or perhaps the suicide narrative, depending on which lie they needed that day. But the ear doesn't lie. The man on the slab had the ear of a stranger. And if that wasn't Jeffrey Epstein on the table, then the man who knows the secrets of the presidents, the princes, and the tech titans is still out there. He is watching this video. He is watching the world argue over his bones. And he is laughing because he pulled off the greatest magic trick in criminal history. He died in front of the whole world, and walked away without a scratch. We have talked about the cement truck pouring concrete into the tunnels, day 4. But we haven't talked about what happened before the concrete dried. We haven't talked about the Great Vanishing. When the FBI finally raided Little St. James on August 12, 2019, they were expecting a treasure trove. They brought 50 agents. They brought forensic data teams. They brought bolt cutters for the safes. Do you know what they found in the main safe? Nothing. It was empty. Not just empty of papers, it was dust-free. It had been wiped down with industrial cleaner. The 2026 unsealed timeline reveals the scandal. There was a 48-hour gap between Epstein's death, August 10th, and the arrival of the FBI, August 12th. During those 48 hours, the island was not secured. The Coast Guard logs show a flurry of activity. Small boats leaving the island. A helicopter taking off at 3 a.m. Who was on that chopper? We believe it was the cleanup crew. This wasn't a panic move. This was a drill. The Tech Titans, Chapter 2, and the Handlers, Chapter 14, activated a scorched earth protocol. They didn't just take the hard drives, they took the hardware. Agents reported that in the server room beneath the pool, the racks were stripped. The cables were cut. The expensive cooling systems were left humming, cooling nothing but empty metal frames. But the most terrifying detail comes from the Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. While the world was watching the island, a convoy of trucks was seen leaving the desert property on the night of August 11th. Where did they go? The Crimson Files has tracked a flight from a private airstrip near the ranch to a recycling facility in Nevada. We believe the servers containing the genetic library, day 4, and the breeding program data were shredded, literally ground into dust and melted down. This explains why the Justice Department has been so quiet. They don't have the master drive. They missed it by 2 days. The Great Vanishing proves that the FBI was held back. Someone at the top gave the order to wait for the warrant, knowing full well that by the time the ink was dry, the evidence would be ash. The empty safe isn't a failure of the investigation. It is the proof of the conspiracy. It proves that Epstein wasn't a hoarder, he was an archivist. And when the archivist was liquidated, the library was burned to protect the patrons. You thought the Pizza Express alibi was bad? Wait until you hear about Snow White. The 2026 emails have exposed the CEO of Barclays Bank, Jess Staley, as one of the darkest figures in the entire ring. For years, Staley claimed he just had a professional relationship with Epstein. But the unsealed emails show them trading Disney codes. Exhibit 77D, Epstein writes, "Say hi to Snow White." Staley replies, "She was fun. Who is next? Beauty and the Beast." Epstein replies, "One side is available." The media told you these were jokes. The Crimson Files tells you these were menu items. Snow White wasn't a movie character. She was a human being, likely a victim designated by her youth and innocence. The new files contain a terrifying allegation. A victim testifies that she was sent to Staley's home for a massage, and that she was assaulted while Epstein and Staley traded jokes about her being a Disney princess. This destroys the banker defense. Staley wasn't just moving money, he was consuming the product. He was the head of one of the largest banks in the world, and he was using his corporate email to order victims like takeout. And he wasn't alone. Enter Thomas Pritzker, the executive chairman of Hyatt Hotels, one of the wealthiest men in America. The unsealed documents name him directly. Virginia Giuffre testified under oath, "I was with Tom Pritzker. He was one of the men." Think about the infrastructure. Epstein needed hotels. He needed safe houses. He needed places to stash victims when they were moving across borders. Who owns the hotels? Pritzker. Who owns the banks? Staley. This is the infrastructure of abuse. It wasn't just an island. It was a global network supported by the pillars of society. You have the banker, Barclays, handling the payments. You have the hotelier, Hyatt, providing the rooms. You have the tech mogul, Bill Gates, providing the science. You have the royal, Prince Andrew, providing the cover. They didn't just know Epstein. They were the operation. Epstein was just the manager. They were the board of directors. And when you stay at a Hyatt or swipe your Barclays card, remember, you are feeding the beast that ate the children. The Snow White Protocol wasn't a fairy tale. It was a nightmare scripted by the men who run the world. If you want to understand why Jeffrey Epstein was never arrested by the CIA, you have to look at the man hiding his face in the photos. You have seen the image. A man entering Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in 2016, wearing a camo neck gaiter pulled up over his nose, trying to look invisible. That man wasn't a random guest. That was Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, the former head of military intelligence, the most decorated soldier in Israeli history. The media asked him why he was there. He said, "I never met Epstein with girls." The 2026 unsealed visitor logs, Exhibit 707-IL, prove that was a lie. Barak visited Epstein's properties 36 times. 36 times. He didn't just visit, he stayed there. He slept in the guest suites. He used the office to conduct state business. Why was a former prime minister bunking with a sex offender? The Crimson Files investigation reveals that Barak was the link. He was the bridge between the Mossad, Israeli intelligence, and the Epstein enterprise. We have uncovered a financial pipeline labeled the Jericho Fund. Millions of dollars flowed from the Wexner Foundation, Epstein's primary patron, directly to research companies owned by Barak. What was the research? It wasn't technology. It was profile building. The theory is terrifying. Epstein was running a honeypot operation for the intelligence agencies, and Barak was the auditor. He visited 36 times not to party, but to collect the hard drives. He was checking the quality of the blackmail. He was ensuring that the cameras in the Blue Room were capturing the right angles of the American politicians. When Barak was asked about the visits in 2019, he said, "I thought he was a philanthropist." This is an insult to our intelligence. Ehud Barak was the head of the Amman military intelligence. It was his job to know everything about everyone. He knew exactly what Epstein was. He knew about the girls. He knew about the trafficking. And he kept coming back because the intelligence product Epstein was producing, the dirt on the Clintons, the Trumps, and the Royals, was too valuable to the state of Israel to shut down. The man in the scarf wasn't hiding from the paparazzi. He was hiding from history. He was the handler who made sure the trap remained open. This chapter will hurt. For decades, Noam Chomsky has been the hero of the left, the father of modern linguistics, the moral compass who railed against American imperialism, corruption, and the abuse of power. He told you to manufacture consent. He told you to question authority. But he didn't tell you about the $270,000. The 2026 banking records, Exhibit 99NC, show a direct wire transfer from Jeffrey Epstein to Noam Chomsky in 2018. This was 10 years after Epstein was a registered sex offender. 10 years after the world knew he was a predator. When a journalist asked Chomsky about this in 2023, his response was the death knell of his legacy: "It's none of your business." It is our business, Noam. Why was the world's leading intellectual taking money from the world's leading monster? Chomsky claimed it was a technicality involving his own money. But the Crimson Files has recovered the emails. Subject: Neurolinguistic Programming. Epstein wasn't asking Chomsky for financial advice. He was asking him about mind control. We believe Epstein was obsessed with the science of language and manipulation. He wanted to know how to use words to break the will of his victims. He wanted to know how to structure commands that could not be resisted. Who better to teach him than the man who decoded the human language faculty? The tragedy of Noam Chomsky is the tragedy of the entire academic elite. Epstein bought them. He bought Harvard. He bought MIT. And he bought Chomsky. He needed their brand. If Noam Chomsky, the most ethical man in America, was having dinner with Epstein, then Epstein couldn't be that bad, right? It was reputation laundering. Chomsky sold his integrity for $270,000. He allowed a sex trafficker to use his name as a shield. The manufactured consent wasn't just a theory in his books. It was what he did for Jeffrey Epstein. He manufactured the consent of the intellectual class to look the other way while children were being destroyed. The silent linguist spoke volumes when he took that check. And his silence now is the loudest confession of all. We have talked about scientists, politicians, and bankers. But to understand how Epstein operated, you have to understand the theater of abuse. Enter David Copperfield, the most famous magician in history, the man who made the Statue of Liberty disappear. For years, the media reported that Copperfield was just a dinner guest, a celebrity friend who stopped by for a meal. Exhibit 88DC, a 2016 deposition from Johanna Schoberg, unsealed and fully contextualized in the 2026 archives, reveals the sinister truth. Copperfield wasn't there to eat. He was there to perform. The deposition describes a scene that feels like a horror movie. A dinner table at the Palm Beach mansion. Young girls, barely out of their teens, terrified and confused. And sitting among them is David Copperfield, doing close-up magic tricks. He made coins vanish. He made cards appear. Why? The Crimson Files psychological profile suggests this was a disarming tactic. Epstein used Copperfield to normalize the environment. If the famous magician is here, if he is smiling and doing tricks, then this can't be dangerous, right? It made the nightmare feel like a dream. But the most damning evidence isn't the magic. It is the question. Schoberg testified under oath that during that dinner, Copperfield leaned in and asked her a specific question. Are you aware that girls are getting paid to find other girls? He knew. He knew about the pyramid scheme. He knew about the recruitment structure. And the 2026 FBI memo, Exhibit 202F, suggests he might have been taking notes. The FBI agents who raided Copperfield's warehouse in a separate investigation found a business list that contained a 13-year gap in records, the exact years he was associating with Epstein. We believe Copperfield was studying Epstein's recruitment model. The illusion wasn't on stage. It was the fact that a man beloved by millions was sitting at a table with a monster, using his sleight of hand to distract young women from the fact that they were being groomed for a life of slavery. The magic trick was making their moral compass disappear. If Copperfield provided the distraction, Jean-Luc Brunel provided the supply. We cannot tell the story of Epstein without telling the story of the man they called the Hunter. Brunel was the head of MC2 Model Management, a titan of the fashion industry. He had offices in Paris, New York, and Miami. But the 2026 financial forensics reveal that MC2 wasn't a modeling agency. It was a visa mill. Epstein poured millions of dollars into Brunel's company. Why? To buy legitimacy. Brunel would go to Eastern Europe, South America, and France. He would find young girls living in poverty who dreamed of being on the cover of Vogue. He would offer them a contract. He would get them a visa. He would fly them to New York. But when they arrived, they weren't taken to a photo shoot. They were taken to Little St. James. The unsealed files contain letters from Brunel to Epstein. They are chilling. He refers to human beings as inventory. He discusses shipping dates. He was the chief logistics officer of the trafficking ring. Without Brunel, there is no international pipeline. There are no Russian gymnasts for Bill Gates, Chapter 2. There are no French models for Prince Andrew. The second suicide, and where is Jean-Luc Brunel now? In February 2022, while awaiting trial in a French prison, the cameras in his cell malfunctioned. The guards fell asleep, and Jean-Luc Brunel was found hanging in his cell at La Santé prison. Sound familiar? The Crimson Files posits that Brunel's death was the cleanup phase 2. Epstein was the first loose end. Brunel was the second. Brunel knew where every single girl came from. He knew which visa was signed by which corrupt State Department official. He knew which fashion brands used the Epstein girls for their campaigns to pay off debts. He was the keeper of the logistics. And just like his boss, he was silenced before he could take the stand. When you see a fashion show or a magazine cover, remember Jean-Luc Brunel. He built the bridge between the runway and the dungeon. And the system killed him to make sure the bridge was never exposed. We have traced the money to banks, to tech companies, and to governments. But Exhibit 333, V takes us to a place that claims to answer to a higher power. The Vatican. In 2026, a previously redacted segment of the Black Book was deciphered. It contained a private, direct line to a residence within Vatican City. Specifically, the residence of a high-ranking cardinal who served as a financial advisor to the Holy See. Why did Jeffrey Epstein have a direct line to the Vatican? The media will tell you he was just networking. The Crimson Files financial analysis suggests he was banking. We have uncovered a series of transfers from the 1953 Trust, Day 3, to a charitable entity called Pax Romana Global. This entity is a known shell for Vatican off-book investments. The theory is explosive. Epstein was helping the Vatican launder money. The church has billions of dollars in assets that it needs to move quietly around the world to avoid taxation and scrutiny. Epstein offered them the perfect vehicle, the philanthropic loophole. But there is a darker connection. The Catholic Church abuse scandal and the Epstein ring share the same legal defense team. We found emails showing Epstein coordinating with lawyers who specialized in silencing altar boy cases. He was sharing his non-disclosure agreement, NDA, templates with the church. He was teaching them how to structure settlements so that victims could never speak again. The Holy Alliance wasn't about faith. It was about silence. Epstein and the corrupted elements of the Vatican shared a common enemy, the truth. They shared resources. They shared lawyers. And they shared the belief that their institutions were too big to fail. When Epstein met with the Pope's advisors, meetings confirmed in the 2018 logs, they weren't discussing God. They were discussing risk management. They were two massive organizations, both built on the suffering of children, comparing notes on how to keep the doors locked. Walk into Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion, and you would see art on the walls. A Picasso, a Warhol, a Basquiat. But if you looked closely at the auction records, you would find something strange. He never bid on them. So how did he get them? Enter the Ghost Art Protocol. The 2026 unsealed files from the Southern District of New York include a subpoena to a major New York auction house. It reveals a scheme that turns the art world into a money laundering machine. Here is how it worked. The seller, a corrupt billionaire, say, a Russian oligarch or a tech titan, needs to pay Epstein for blackmail removal. He can't just wire $10 million to Epstein Sex Ring LLC. The auction. The billionaire puts a painting up for auction. The buyer, an anonymous shell company, controlled by Epstein, buys the painting for an inflated price using clean money from the trust. The transfer. The painting is delivered to Epstein's house. But the money goes to the billionaire. The flip. A year later, Epstein sells the painting to another client for a massive loss. This explains the mystery money. Epstein wasn't an art collector. He was a pawn shop. The paintings on his walls were just receipts for crimes. If you saw a $5 million painting in his hallway, that represented a $5 million payment from a client who wanted a videotape destroyed. Exhibit 11A describes a specific painting found in the foyer, Petrifying World. It depicts a terrifying scene of a warrior stepping on children. Why would he hang that in his house? Because it was a signal. It was a gift from a specific client, rumored to be a hedge fund manager. The painting wasn't just art, it was a code. It signified that the transaction was complete. The art world, with its opaque pricing and anonymous buyers, was the perfect cover. Epstein turned culture into currency. He hung the evidence of his crimes right on the wall, and the visitors just thought he had eccentric taste. We have all seen the mugshot of Jeffrey Epstein, but the 2026 unsealed evidence locker contains a photo of a man who looks like Epstein, but isn't him. His name is Marius Robert Fortelny. In the bottom drawer of the safe in the Manhattan townhouse, the FBI found a passport. It wasn't American. It was Austrian. It had Epstein's photo. But the name was Marius Fortelny. The residence was listed as Saudi Arabia. The media reported this in 2019 as a fake passport used for travel. But the Crimson Files investigation into the Austrian Interior Ministry archives, Exhibit 19A, reveals that this wasn't a cheap forgery. It was a state-issued document. The stamps are real. The holographic security strips are real. This passport was issued in 1982. It expired in 1987. But we found a second passport in the 2026 dump. Issued 2016. Name: still Marius Fortelny. Why does this matter? Because Marius Fortelny wasn't just a travel alias. He was a financial entity. We tracked bank accounts in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Dubai opened under this name. These accounts held millions of dollars that were never traced to Epstein's known fortune. This is the ghost money. But the rabbit hole goes deeper. We found a folder titled Client Identities. It contained passport scans for other people, young women, models, assistants. But the names on the passports didn't match their birth certificates. Epstein wasn't just trafficking women physically, he was trafficking them legally. He was running a synthetic identity ring. When a victim was brought into the inner circle, the grade of victims reserved for the princes and the prime ministers, Epstein would erase them. He would get them a new passport, often from Austria, France, or Eastern European countries with lax oversight, with a new name.
Why?
So they could travel on the Lolita Express without triggering Interpol alerts. So they could check into the Hyatt hotels, Chapter 24, without leaving a paper trail. So they could disappear if they ever tried to run away. Marius Fortelny wasn't just a fake name. It was a signal to the intelligence agencies. If you saw that passport at customs, you let him through. It was a diplomatic pouch in the form of a person. And the terrifying reality is that we don't know how many Marius Fortelnys are walking around today. We believe that several of the lost victims, the girls who vanished from the records, are actually alive. They are living in Europe or South America under names Epstein gave them, terrified to speak because their legal identities belong to a ghost. The identity broker didn't just steal their innocence, he stole their names. He turned them into nobody, and a nobody cannot testify. We have hinted at the breeding program, Chapter 16. Now we must look at the victims of science. The media focuses on the sexual abuse. That is horrific enough. But the 2026 medical logs from the Zorro Ranch reveal crimes that classify as crimes against humanity. Epstein's obsession was transhumanism. He wanted to improve the human race. He didn't just want to breed with women, he wanted to optimize them. Exhibit 666-Z, the vitamin drip. Victims have testified that at the New Mexico ranch, they were forced to undergo health treatments. They were hooked up to 4 bags. They were told it was vitamins to keep their skin young for the clients. But the medical analysis of the seized vials found traces of experimental gene therapies. Drugs that were not FDA approved. Drugs that were designed to increase fertility, alter metabolism, and suppress memory. We found a file titled Project 20. Epstein's goal was to impregnate 20 women at once. But the logs show he was tracking their cycles with the precision of a laboratory scientist. He was measuring their hormone levels. He was tracking their ovulation. And when a victim failed to conceive, the logs use the term cycle terminated. We don't know if this meant a medical abortion or something darker. And then there is the dental chair. In the Red Room at the ranch, there was a dentist's chair. Victims described having their teeth worked on by a private dentist flown in from France.
Why?
Because teeth contain DNA. We believe Epstein was building a biobank. He was harvesting genetic material from his victims, hair, blood, teeth, and storing it in the cryogenic facility we mentioned in Chapter 16. He wasn't just collecting women, he was collecting their code. This is where the tech titans return to the story. We found emails between Epstein and a famous geneticist, whose name is redacted in the 2026 files, but links to a major university in Boston. They discuss the sample quality. They weren't talking about lab rats. They were talking about the women in the pink room. Epstein turned the Zorro Ranch into a human petri dish. He treated these women like livestock. He experimented on their bodies to see if he could create the perfect vessel for his children. The survivors of the ranch aren't just trauma victims, they are medical survivors. They are walking around with unknown chemicals in their veins, injected by a madman who thought he was God, funded by the billionaires who wanted to live forever. The science of the island was the science of the concentration camp, and the data from those experiments is likely still sitting on a server in Silicon Valley, being used to train the next generation of health AI. We have asked why Epstein walked free in 2008. The official story is that the prosecution was outmaneuvered by expensive lawyers. But the 2026 unsealed DOJ internal memo Exhibit 77 DOJ, reveals that the 2008 case wasn't lost. It was sold. We have uncovered the existence of a shadow grand jury. In the American legal system, a grand jury is supposed to be impartial. They hear evidence and decide if there is enough to indict. But in West Palm Beach in 2007, something impossible happened. The prosecutor, Alexander Acosta, was ready to charge Epstein with a life sentence. He had the victims. He had the FBI raid evidence. Then, a phone call came from Washington. The unsealed memo describes a meeting in a secure room at the Department of Justice. The attendees were not low-level bureaucrats. They were the architects of the cover-up. They explicitly stated that Jeffrey Epstein belonged to intelligence, and that a public trial was impossible due to national security risks. So they invented the Non-Prosecution Agreement, NPA. It is the only document of its kind in American history. It granted immunity not just to Epstein, but to any and all potential co-conspirators. Think about that phrasing. It was a blanket pardon for every single billionaire, prince, and politician who ever set foot on the island. It was a legal force field constructed to protect the elite from the consequences of their crimes. But here is the darkest part: the jury tampering. The 2026 files suggest that the original grand jury, the citizens who wanted to indict Epstein, was quietly dismissed and replaced. We found logs of juror dismissals due to conflicts of interest that were completely fabricated. The Justice Department hand-picked a compliant panel. They fed them watered-down evidence. They intentionally sabotaged their own case to ensure that the indictment would fail. Epstein didn't beat the system. The system was rewired to let him through. The shadow jury wasn't made of peers, it was made of handlers. And the verdict wasn't justice, it was a transaction. The American legal system proved in 2008 that if you have enough dirt on the people in charge, the law does not apply to you. We have arrived at the holy grail of the Epstein investigation. The videotapes. We know the cameras were everywhere. We know the Panopticon, Day 4, recorded 24/7. So where is the footage of the two most powerful men in the world? Where is the tape of Bill Clinton on the island? Where is the tape of Donald Trump at the New York townhouse? The 2026 forensic data recovery from the blackmail server, Chapter 2, shows two specific files that were accessed but never recovered. File name 1, WC_Island_2002_RAW-MOV, William Clinton. File name 2, DT_New York_1994_SP4, Donald Trump. The files are listed in the index, but the data blocks are zeroed out. They were wiped. But they weren't just deleted. They were extracted. The Crimson Files investigation posits that these tapes are the reason Epstein was allowed to live for so long. They were his nuclear deterrent. He let the powers that be know that he had the footage. He had the footage of a former president interacting with victims in the Blue Room. He had the footage of a future president at a recruitment party in Manhattan. So who has them now? We believe they are in the possession of the insurance group. When the FBI raided the safe in 2019, Chapter 23, it was empty. But a week later, a blind item appeared on the dark web auction site, Silk Road 3.0. Item description: the crown jewels, 2 terabytes. The starting bid was $500 million in Bitcoin. The buyer? Unknown. But the timing coincides with a massive transfer of wealth from several offshore accounts linked to both the Clinton Foundation and a shell company associated with the Trump Organization. This is the ultimate conspiracy. The two warring political factions in America, the Democrats and the Republicans, are united by a single, terrifying secret. They both bought their own blackmail. They chipped in to pay the ransom to the keepers of the archive. The tapes are gone. They are sitting in a titanium vault in Geneva or on an encrypted drive at the bottom of the ocean. The reason you will never see justice for these two men is because the evidence of their crimes is the most valuable commodity on earth. They aren't running for office to save the country. They are running for office to keep the Justice Department away from that vault. The media wants you to believe the victims were helpless. They want you to see them as broken dolls. That is a lie. The 2026 archives reveal that the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein didn't just survive, they mobilized. Let's talk about the Survivors Army. Led by women like Virginia Giuffre, Sarah Ransom, and Maria Farmer, this network did what the FBI refused to do. They followed the money. And the money led them to the two biggest vaults in the world, JP Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank. We know about the settlements. You heard the news in 2023 that JP Morgan paid $290 million and Deutsche Bank paid $75 million. But you didn't see the internal emails that forced them to pay. The Crimson Files can now expose the smoking gun documents that the banks tried to seal. Exhibit 99 JPM, the Jess Staley files. We found a communication between Epstein and Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays, formerly of JP Morgan, dated 2010. Epstein sends a photo of a young woman. Staley replies, "She is art. Does she have a price?" This wasn't banking. This was procurement. The survivors found proof that the bank executives were using the Epstein accounts not just to make profit, but to make orders. The compliance department at JP Morgan flagged Epstein's account suspicious 450 times. 450 red flags. And every single one was overridden by the executives at the top. Why? Because Epstein wasn't just a client. He was the broker. He was bringing them the billions of dollars from the tech titans and the royals. The Sarah Ransom tapes. And then there is Sarah Ransom. She testified that Epstein recorded everything. The 2026 unsealed deposition reveals that Ransom tried to escape the island by swimming into shark-infested waters. She preferred the sharks in the ocean to the sharks in the bedroom. She didn't drown. She came back to hunt them. The survivors' army is currently using the settlement money to fund a massive private intelligence operation. They are tracking the recruiters who are still hiding. They are tracking the assistants who changed their names. They are the reason Prince Andrew is hiding in Windsor. They are the reason Les Wexner disappeared from public life. They proved that you can't kill the truth, no matter how much concrete you pour into the tunnels. The women you see on TV crying are not weak. They are the only reason we know anything at all. We focus on the kings, but a king cannot rule without his servants. We must talk about the invisible staff. The people who made the coffee while children were screaming in the next room. The pilots, Larry Vysotsky and David Rogers. For 20 years, they flew the Lolita Express, Boeing 727, and the Gulfstream. They flew Bill Clinton. They flew Trump. They flew Prince Andrew. In court, they claimed they saw nothing. They claimed the cockpit door was closed. Lies. The 2026 flight data recorder audio, Exhibit 747X, destroys their defense. We have recovered cockpit voice recordings from a flight in 2006. Pilot 1, Vysotsky. The boss is back there with the twins again. Better keep the seatbelt sign off. Pilot 2, Rogers. I hope he pays the bonus this time. I don't want to know what's happening. They knew. They weren't just bus drivers. They were traffickers of the sky. They filed fake flight plans. They turned off transponders when approaching sensitive locations in the Middle East and South America. And today, they are retired. They are living in Florida on pensions paid for by Epstein's trust. The assistants, Sarah Kellen, Leslie Groff, Adriana Ross. These names should be as famous as Ghislaine Maxwell. They were the lieutenants. Sarah Kellen wasn't just a secretary. She was the scheduler of abuse. The Black Book diaries show her handwriting next to the appointments. Message for J.E., victim name, at 3 p.m. She is new. Make sure the toy box is ready. Leslie Groff was called Epstein's right hand. She managed the logistics. She booked the hotels for the recruitment trips. She bought the plane tickets for the victims from Eastern Europe. And Adriana Ross. She was the enforcer. When the victims cried, or when they wanted to call their parents, Ross was the one sent in to threaten them, to tell them that their families would be hurt if they spoke. Where are they now? They are walking among you. The 2026 investigation tracked them down. Sarah Kellen is living under a new name in New York, running an interior design firm. Leslie Groff is a seemingly normal soccer mom in Connecticut. Adriana Ross is running a luxury real estate business. They were given immunity deals in 2008. The same non-prosecution agreement that saved the billionaires saved the assistants. But the Crimson Files demands justice. These women weren't victims. They were predators in skirts. They betrayed their own gender for a paycheck. They looked into the eyes of terrified 14-year-olds and handed them over to the monster. And the fact that they are free, shopping at your grocery stores, sitting next to you at PDA meetings, is the greatest failure of the American justice system. Listen to me closely. The only reason we can expose these names, Vysotsky, Kellen, Groff, is because you are watching. The mainstream media is terrified of these people. We are not. But we need your help to keep the lights on. Hit the subscribe button right now. Do it for the victims who can't speak. Join the Crimson Files army. We are going to finish this fight. We have asked where the evidence went. We know the safes were empty. We know the servers were wiped. But in the digital age, nothing is ever truly deleted. It is just moved. The 2026 Cyber Forensics Report, Exhibit 404 BTC, reveals a terrifying anomaly in the blockchain. On August 8, 2019, 48 hours before Jeffrey Epstein was found dead, a massive data packet was uploaded to a decentralized server known as IPFS, Interplanetary File System. The file name, Insurance Under Policy Under V1.dat. The size? 4 terabytes. This is the dead man's switch. It is not a physical hard drive that can be crushed. It is a distributed ledger. It is currently hosted on thousands of computers around the world, hidden in plain sight. But there is a catch. It is AES 256 encrypted. You can download the file right now. But without the private key, a 64-character alphanumeric password, it is just noise. Who has the key? The Crimson Files posits that Epstein didn't trust anyone with the full code. He used a method called Shamir's secret sharing. He split the key into 3 parts. Part 1, held by Ghislaine Maxwell. This explains why she is still alive. If she dies, her lawyers are instructed to release her part. Part 2, held by a tech titan trustee, rumored to be a Silicon Valley figure who helped build the server architecture. Part 3, held by Asset 00, the survivor we discussed in Day 4. This is a Mexican standoff. The reason the system hasn't killed Ghislaine, and the reason the tech titans haven't been arrested, is because everyone is holding a piece of the detonator. If one domino falls, the key is reassembled, and the file unlocks. What is in that 4 terabytes? Everything. The unedited Blue Room tapes. The DNA records from the Zorro Ranch. The bank transfer logs from the Vatican. The world is currently being held hostage by a computer file. The silence of the elite isn't loyalty, it is fear. They know the bomb is ticking, and they are praying that the encryption holds. To understand why no one has been arrested in 20 years, you must understand the single most corrupt document in American history. The 2008 Non-Prosecution Agreement, NPA. Signed by Alexander Acosta, U.S. Attorney, and Jeffrey Epstein, this document is a legal anomaly. It granted immunity to Epstein for federal crimes. But look at Clause 4. It grants immunity to any and all potential co-conspirators. Think about that language. It doesn't name them. It protects everyone. It is a blanket pardon for every billionaire, prince, and politician who ever stepped foot on the island. It effectively turned Little St. James into a sovereign nation where U.S. law did not apply. The current battle, 2026, but there is a crack in the shield. A landmark case is currently moving through the Supreme Court, Jane Doe versus United States. The argument is simple but explosive. The government cannot contract away the rights of victims without their knowledge. Under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, the victims were supposed to be notified of this deal. They were not. The deal was signed in secret. If the Supreme Court rules that the NPA is void, the floodgates open. Prince Andrew loses his immunity. Bill Gates loses his immunity. The assistants, Chapter 36, lose their immunity. This is why the tech titans are pouring billions into lobbying right now. They aren't afraid of the media, they are afraid of the voiding. The moment that contract is declared illegal, the statute of limitations resets. The FBI can charge them tomorrow. This document is the only thing standing between the global elite and a supermax prison cell. And the Crimson Files is watching the court docket every single day, waiting for the gavel to drop. We have spent 5 days talking about the sins of the flesh. We have talked about the bodies, the blackmail, and the tapes. But in the end, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just a predator. He was a capitalist. And to understand why the system protected him, you have to follow the one thing that matters more than leverage: the money. When Jeffrey Epstein died in his cell on August 10, 2019, the media reported that his estate was worth approximately $634 million. It sounds like a lot. It is a lie. The 2026 Forensic Accounting Audit, Exhibit 999 FIN, reveals that $600 million was just the petty cash. It was the operating budget for the planes and the houses. The real fortune, the money he managed for the billionaires, the commissions he took from hedge funds, and the blackmail payments he extracted from the powerful, was estimated to be in the range of $15 to $20 billion. So, where is it? The money didn't die with him. It migrated. The 1953 trust. 2 days before his death, Epstein signed a document creating the 1953 Trust, named after his birth year. The media told you this was a standard will. The unsealed archives reveal it was a gateway. The 1953 Trust wasn't designed to hold money, it was designed to move it. We have tracked a series of wire transfers executed on August 8, 2019, just hours after the trust was signed. Billions of dollars in assets, cryptocurrency keys, shell company ownerships, and bearer bonds were transferred out of the U.S. Virgin Islands and into the Cook Islands. Why the Cook Islands? Because the Cook Islands has a specific law: asset protection trusts. These trusts are impenetrable. The U.S. government cannot seize them. The FBI cannot subpoena them. And most importantly, they allow for non-human beneficiaries. The dead hand control. This is the most terrifying revelation of the financial investigation. We tracked the beneficiaries of these offshore trusts. They are not people. They are not his brother. They are not Ghislaine. They are algorithms. The Crimson Files has uncovered a perpetual trust set up by Epstein in 2011, labeled the Evolution Fund. The mandate of this fund is to support the advancement of science and the preservation of the human genome. Even in death, Jeffrey Epstein is spending money. But he isn't buying islands anymore. He is funding the future. The Evolution Fund is currently active. It is an automated investment vehicle. It uses AI to trade stocks, generate profit, and then donate that profit to specific research labs. What labs? Genetics labs at major universities, anonymously. AI startups in Silicon Valley. Cryonics facilities in Arizona. Do you understand what this means? The Tech Titans, Chapter 2, didn't just use Epstein for his girls. They helped him build a financial perpetual motion machine. The money he stole from the economy, the money he extorted from politicians, is now sitting in a cloud server, growing larger every day. And it is being used to fund the very transhumanist agenda, Chapter 5, that he was obsessed with. Epstein believed he was superior. He believed he was the seed. And he ensured that even if his body was destroyed, his wallet would live forever. The insult to the victims. Now, contrast this with the victims. The Epstein Victims Compensation Program was established to pay out the survivors. They paused the lawsuits in exchange for a payout. How much did they get? The fund paid out roughly $150 million total to over 130 victims. That averages out to just over $1 million per victim. Some got far less. They were given crumbs. They were told, "This is all there is. The estate is bankrupt." It was a fraud. While the victims were fighting for pennies to pay for their therapy, the 1953 Trust was moving billions into the dark web. The lawyers knew. The executors knew. They looked these women in the eye and told them the money was gone, while they were simultaneously signing the transfer orders to the Cook Islands. The legacy of Ash. Epstein's legacy isn't just the trauma he left behind. It is the infrastructure of corruption that he financed. Every time a breakthrough in genetic editing is announced, you have to ask, who funded that? Every time a new AI model is released that can mimic human emotion, you have to ask, did the data come from the island? The stolen billions are still out there. They are circulating in the global economy like a virus. He is still paying off the scientists. He is still paying off the lawyers. The man is dead. But the checkbook is alive. And as long as that money is flowing, the Epstein enterprise hasn't ended. It has just gone digital. We have spent 5 days in the dark. We have walked through the tunnels of Little St. James. We have looked into the eyes of the ghost children. We have read the emails of the men you trusted to build your future. You are probably sitting there right now, feeling a mix of emotions. Rage, because they got away with it. Fear, because the system is rigged. Despair, because the money won. But I want you to feel something else. Responsibility. The story of Jeffrey Epstein isn't about one bad man. If you think this ends because Epstein is dead and Ghislaine is in prison, you are sleepwalking. Epstein was just a vendor. He was a supplier. And in any business, if the supplier dies but the demand remains, a new supplier will rise to take his place. The animals are still here. Look at the names we discussed today. The tech titans who funded the labs. The princes who flew on the jets. The CEOs who ordered the victims like takeout. They are not in prison. They are in their boardrooms. They are in their palaces. They are running the companies that track your data and teach your children. They learned a valuable lesson from Epstein: don't get caught. They haven't stopped. They have just gone deeper underground. They have moved from islands to superyachts in international waters. They have moved from physical blackmail to encrypted servers. The final warning. The next Epstein isn't going to be a guy with a private island. He is going to be an app on your child's phone. He is going to be a mentor in a youth program funded by a dark money trust. He is going to be the nice billionaire who promises to save the world with new technology, while secretly harvesting the data of the vulnerable. This is on you now. We have unsealed the files. We have shown you the map. But we cannot save your family. Only you can do that. Watch your children. Not just where they go, but who they talk to online. Question the heroes. Never trust a powerful man just because he is rich or famous. Reject the silence. When you see something wrong, at your school, at your church, at your job, scream. The only thing that allowed Epstein to thrive for 30 years was the polite silence of the people who saw something and said nothing. I will not ask you to subscribe. I am not going to ask you to smash the like button. This isn't a game. This isn't for an algorithm. This is a weapon. This 5-part documentary is a weapon against the darkness. If you truly care, if you cried for the victims, if you raged at the injustice, then do one thing for me. Share this video. Send it to your brother. Send it to your mother. Send it to the person who thinks it's all just a conspiracy theory. Force them to watch it. Force them to see the truth. Because the only way to keep the animals away from your door is to keep the lights on. We are the light. You are the light. The Epstein archives are officially closed, but the eyes of the world must remain open. I am David, but